What a joy that you have found us for this podcast. How exciting it is to think that this spiritual message is going out to people around this planet. Whether your life is working at a peak level or whether it can use some enhancement, have I got the message for you today. So get a piece of paper, get ready to take notes, call a friend, have them watch this podcast also. Then you too can have something to talk about and take it to a deeper level. So enjoy. Here we go. Hey, good morning, Seaside. Oh, what a joy it is to be with you today. It's an exciting day. You just feel the aliveness in the air. What a great week. You know, the summer solstice was this week. I trust you're out dancing under the wildness of the shifting of the seasons, right? Yeah. What a visual. And also, this coming weekend is the blue moon. It only happens once in a blue moon. And that's 2 full moons in a month, not a very common occurrence. And the big news is the grunion had been running this week. So I told you it's a month. It's a powerful month in our town, and it just stirs up that inner something. Just makes one want to believe in the Spirit. Makes one want to believe in the life force. Makes you believe in that something that stirs in the heart and soul that makes you just feel so good. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, wonderful, wonderful poet. She said that the earth is crammed with heaven, and every common bush is afire with God. And only he who has eyes takes off his shoes. And those that don't sit around it and pluck blackberries. Well, I figure those blackberries are pretty good, you know? That's an okay thing to pluck blackberries and partake of the wonderful nectars of the gods, but you know what? There's something even more exciting. That is God itself. It is that which makes that bush come ablaze with fire. It's what Moses saw, and when he took his shoes off to be able to commune with that something, that life force that is stirring. And you know, that life force, that spirit that is concealed inside of you, wants to be let out. You know, it is looking for an outlet. It is looking for that vortex. It is looking for that voice. It is looking for that life. That spirit that is concealed inside of your being is looking for that avenue to come into this world, and you are that place where heaven meets earth, where that the spirit is just crammed and it wants to come out. But when you do not feel that connection, when you do not feel that something, you notice there's this like deep longing in your soul, a deep longing like a lost child looking for his parents. That longing that you know there's something essential that is missing. And yet you're not quite sure. Something essential is missing. It's like dancing right on the edge of your vision. And you know it's there, but you have forgotten it's there, like the air that you forgot until the wind blows. But yet that essential something is what holds you, takes care of you, it nourishes your heart and your soul, it entices you to come forward. You got to believe it's there. You got to believe this something that's calling you to express yourself in life. You got to believe it is there, even when you do not see it. That longing of your soul. I like what Lily Tallman said in her one-woman show. She said, I always knew I was going to be somebody. I just now realize I should have been more specific. I know I'm going to be somebody. I know I have got something inside of me, but what is that talent that I am here to share? What is that? I've got to believe that there's more there than what I'm experiencing right now in my life. As good as it is right now, there is more. There's more seeking to express itself, and are you able to move on to the next level, the next layer? There's a wonderful Swedish story and tale. And so it comes from one of my Scandinavian brothers' countries. And it is about parents, king and queen, that kind of got into some misfortune, and they ended up having to betroth their princess daughter, Eris, to the fearful dragon. And when the king and queen shared this news with their daughter, needless to say, she was not happy. She was pissed. Yeah, she took off out of the protected little kingdom and went to the wise woman who was just on the outside of the skirts. The wise woman who had 12 children, 29 grandchildren, and knew the ways of men and dragons, and shared her story. And the wise woman said, you know what, you do have to marry the dragon. But let me tell you what to do on your wedding night. And so along with that, she told her on the wedding night that she was to wear 10 beautiful wedding gowns, one on top of the other. And so on the day that they had the wedding, which was great, then they had the feast and the festivities in the palace. And after the festivities, the dragon swooped his new bride up off her feet and took her up to the bedchamber. And as he was approaching her, she said, wait, I am looking forward to sharing my heart with you. But first, I must take off my layers, and I ask that you do the same. The dragon said, no problem. Count me in. And, and so she took her first gown, beautiful gown, off, and then the dragon went ahead and took his layer of scales off. It was very painful, but he had taken his scales off in the past. And she took the next gown off, and he then went in and took off his next layer, very painful, and she took off the next layer, and he had to dig his claws in and dug deeper down into his dragonness and his armor, and he pulled it off, and then she took the next layer off, and by the fifth layer, he was just weeping copious tears. They were pouring forth with the pain and the vulnerability, and she continued to take off the next layer, and he dug in deeper in the pain and the exposure, and as she got down to the last layer of her clothes, he pulled off the last vestige of his dragonness, and what emerged was a prince. And I got to tell you, it is. Needless to say, they proceeded on to do the pleasures of their wedding night that the wise woman with the 12 children and 29 grandchildren had told her about. And, the thing about that story is that we all have aspects of those characters in our being. We have that scaly dragon that protects us. We have those parents that maybe made their blunders. We have the attentive princess. We have the wise grandmother, the emerging prince of our being come forth, and that person we don't even know who cast that spell upon us. But what is fascinating about this story is that as you take off the next layer of the scales and the protection and the pain that it brings, it also brings a sense of something new, something comfortable. As they became more available for one another, as they became more receptive to one another, there was the tenderness, there was the vulnerability, there was the realness of who they were as they began to drop off their persona to the world. And as you begin to take off the first layers of your judgment, of your anger, what you find under the next level is the hurt, the pain, the guilt. And as you continue to move deeper and deeper, you begin to discover more and more of who you are. You've got to believe this is so. You've got to believe that is who you are inside. It is beautiful. It is vulnerable. It is real. It is that longing in your soul, that deep longing that is constantly out there searching, that has got to believe that this earth is crammed with heaven and that it is okay. It is okay. That this healing aspect of our being is the natural approach. The healing and the transformation of who you are, stepping into a greater expression of who you are, has happened from the beginning of recorded history. These stories, it's not true only to Sweden. These stories are everywhere. It's not only Jesus who was the one healer. They had healing long before Jesus ever walked on this planet. You had, the sages and the mystics. You had over in India, you had Buddha, who was doing the healings. There was amazing healings going on before Christianity, 500 years before Christianity was ever around. We have got to know that this natural transformation, you've got to believe that the healing and the natural transformation of who you are is possible, it is real, it is normal, and it is right. And that you can step forth and bring forth that something that is within you. Too often we're looking to the outside for the healing. We're looking outside for the answer. We're looking outside for the reinforcement, the validation. Who I am is this whatever I put out there to the world. I am not this performance. I am something that is hidden behind those scales of my protectiveness. I've got to believe that vulnerable aspect of who I am is more beautiful than anything I could begin to imagine. I've got to bring forth the withinness. I've got to live from the withinness of who I am. And know that what I bring is going to be different. I can't compare it, and I can't judge it to what others. I can't compare it to the guys I'm working with, to my siblings, to anybody. What I've got is my unique expression. It's beautiful. You know, in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 24, it says, there are diversity of gifts, but it's the same Spirit. Diversity of gifts, but it's the same Spirit. There's diversity of gifts. What is it that you're bringing out here? And as you bring it, you may stumble. But I got to tell you, the crisis, if you stumble in your life, is an invitation. Whatever that crisis is, whatever that challenge is, it is an invitation to go deeper. You know, the positive thinkers we hear so much about, positive thinkers do not refuse to look at the negative. They do not refuse to look at the challenges. What they do is they refuse to dwell on it. They refuse to dwell on it being the only thing that there is. They tend to see that there is more to life, that there are greater possibilities for the expansion of their soul, the expansion of their longing. They got to believe that there's more than this pain. When you get knocked down, you don't stay down. People get knocked down. Whether you're working at your work and you've got coworkers who are just chatting away or belittling you. Whether you've got a relationship that went sour or south or betrayed or someone who stole and you get knocked down. It is important to be able to stand up inside of your soul and your spirit and believe. Believe with all that you have that I can stand up here. Saying in boxing, knock down 7, get up 8. Actually, knock down 6, get up 7, but you get knocked down. You know, you just get up more than you get knocked down is the bottom line there. You got to believe you got that, something that'll pop you back up. There was a little guy who came to church. Not this church, thank goodness, I guess. But the story I heard, no, they're all welcome. But he didn't want to... It's just he didn't want to stay in his seat, okay? It's not necessarily the appropriate behavior, but if you want to stand up and amen and let us hear, that's great. But he wouldn't sit down. So mom would sit him down and he'd pop back up. And mom would sit him down. He'd stay there about 30 seconds and he'd pop back up. Mom finally put her hand on his head and sat him down. He just looked at her smiling and said, I may be sitting down on the outside, but I'm standing up on the inside. Something in him that couldn't be kept down. There's something in him that was able to stand and believe. And so when you find yourself in a situation where you may not be able to stand up right away, maybe the doctor said something that is not a pleasant verdict. You know, maybe you are in an environment of work where you just got some stuff going on. If you can just know that you can stand up inside, you know that there's nothing that can keep you down. This is called a spiritual practice. And spiritual practice takes some work. It comes with facing that crisis and knowing, just knowing that you can stand up. It comes from digging down deeper in your life and in your world. You know, sometimes the mind gets flabby and lazy because it's not doing it, and it just allows itself to acquiesce to the ways of this world. It comes from a discipline where you can stand up and realize that what is going on in your life is still a place where the earth is crammed with heaven. That I've got to believe. I've got to believe it even if I don't see it on the outside right now. I've got to live from that withinness. I've got to live from that longing and give it space and give it breath. I've got to be able to know that it is okay to be able to step forth in life. From the Upanishads, wonderful Hindu writings, it says, living in this world and living in spirit are not incompatible. Living in this life and living in this world are not incompatible. You do not need to separate them, and they do not need to be compartmentalized. They are not contradictory. They are one and the same. Diversity of gifts, the same Spirit. But you're the one who has to be willing to come back to it. You got to be willing to honor that longing, that whisper in your ear, your soul, your spirit. You may have gone off on this thing called life, off doing this world. But you are the one who must choose to believe again, no matter what's going on. Young man by the name of Calvin Lewis, sitting on the side of the road, writing a letter to his dad. Dear Dad, I would want to come home. He ran away from home after high school. After high school, his parents wanted him to go to college. He had grown up on the farm, working on the farm. He didn't want to go to school. He didn't like it. He thought the chores around the house were too much. He and his dad got into a fight. He stuffed a few things in his bag and left. And as he was walking out, his dad came out on the porch and said, if you leave, don't come back. And his mom standing on the porch crying, tears pouring down her face. You could imagine the scene. Not pretty, not something any parent would want. So his son's riding on the side of the road. Dear Dad, I want to come home. You know, I have been to the east and to the west. I've had dozens of jobs. Nothing ever amounted to much. They all wanted somebody with more education. I met a lot of people, some good, some rough and tough. Please, Dad, I would want to come home. I want to go back to college and learn about farming, and if you would let me come work on the farm with you. I'm going to be passing by the house in a few weeks or in a few days, and I don't know when because I'm hitchhiking. So you can't respond to this letter, but if it's okay to come back and you've changed your mind, would you turn the porch light on? I'll make sure I come by at night. And if it's not on, I sure understand. I love you, and I now understand how much you love me. Signed, Calvin. So Calvin sent that off. He started hitchhiking back. First day didn't get very far. Next day, maybe 50 miles. Next day, he got a little bit farther, and then he was sleeping on the side of the road, and it was just getting pretty messy, and just sleeping outside, making his way back, some days closer than others. And he was getting closer. He got a ride one day from a salesman, a man in the car, and they started talking. And he said, hey, young guy, how's it going? Where are you going? And Calvin said, I'm going home. And he says, where have you been? He says, I have been all over. And he said, well, how long have you been away from home? Calvin says, I've been gone 1 year, 1 month, and 15 days. I said, wow. And so as night began to come down, he said, come on in for dinner. Calvin said, I don't have any money. He said, I'll buy you dinner. And why don't you stay, and afterwards you get cleaned up and you get showered because you'll be home soon. You need to look okay. So the next morning after breakfast, he thanked him. He said, you're very nice. He said, you know what? I've got 2 sons, and my oldest one ran away 2 years ago. 2 years, 1 month, and 2 days. And I just hope there will be somebody out there that will be nice to my son. Calvin got probably within 50 miles of his home. Night was starting to fall, and a truck driver picked him up. And he started driving down the road, and as he got closer, it started to rain, started coming down in sheets, and it was dark and rainy and pouring. And as he was getting closer, his heart was pounding. He was getting excited, and as he was getting closer, he was trying to see and look down the road, and all of a sudden he couldn't look. He was afraid to look. He covered his eyes. What happens if that light wasn't there? And as they were driving, the truck driver said, look over there. That must be some crazy people who live in that house. Out there on the porch, there are 4 chairs. Each of them has a bright lantern in it, and there's some old man with a flashlight pointing at every car going by the road, and they left the porch light on. I share that story with you because that is the Spirit just waiting for you. That light is just shining bright, waiting for you to make that journey home. You got to believe there is that kind of welcoming waiting for you to remember, to answer that longing of your soul and your spirit, to remember that the heaven is just everywhere present, that this earth is crammed with heaven. You got to believe in your heart and soul. And as you believe, what happens is your belief and your faith runs out in front of time. It runs out in front of the unfoldment of this world. It runs before you in a way that you cannot even begin to imagine, but you have got to believe that there is something inside of you that is so capable of expressing its diversity of gifts in this world. And as you begin to believe and you begin to know that that spirit that has been captive inside of you is seeking its outlet, you begin to drop. You begin to drop that old dragon skin. You begin to step into that place where your body begins to relax. Your heart softens. the stories of the mind fall away, and you begin to recognize that dragon scale and armor, which was, you realize that was nothing more than some karmic spell that was cast upon you that you no longer need. And as you do, what happens is you emerge that prince, that princess, that child of God that can be vulnerable, exposed, and expressed for this world to see. You are that precious child of God. You gotta believe. So it is. So I'd like to invite the ushers to come forward as we do take our gift from our heart. Again, with a lot of heart and soul and passion. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I give, and all that I receive. I am prosperous now. Hey, I trust you enjoyed that podcast. It was very exciting to be able to create that and to know that there are people like you all around the world that are observing and integrating these spiritual principles into their life. And so if you enjoyed it, what I'd like to do is encourage you to tell a friend or bring several friends together and watch another one of these podcasts, and then afterwards take some time to talk about the spiritual principles, to talk about the stories and what significance they have and relevance they have in your life. What then happens is it moves to a deeper and deeper level in your world. It becomes real and assists you to create the freedom in your life that your heart and soul so desire. So if you like this, I encourage you to watch it again, but also tune into our website here at seasidecenter.org. There, you can get some of my written material and take a look at it. You can read some of my spiritual prayers. You can even go to our online bookstore and order some of the books. And if you're so moved, what I greatly would appreciate is your financial support, which you could do online at seasidecenter.org. It is support like yours that assists us to be able to continue to do these kinds of gifts for humanity and send it out to the world. Because you know what? We are making a difference with this spiritual message. And because of support like yours, people are being touched in the farthest reaches of this planet, as well as our backyard, more than we could ever begin to realize. So I thank you from the fullness of my heart for making a difference.